Hi everyone, Beer League here. We're going to be talking about our Cyclone Slayer build here in a three-part quick video series. In part one, we're going to be talking a little bit about the gearing of the build and some crafting potential options for the build. And then we're also going to do a second part of the video to talk about the passive tree. Quickly talk about the Atlas passive tree as well, although that one is less impactful for the build. And then to finish it off in the third part, we're just going to be doing some map clears with the build, just to showcase some of the things that it is capable of. As of right now, I've done all content in the game with this build solo. You can see I've completed 38 of the objectives, got a couple more things to go here to finish out 40-40. Mostly probably going to push for solo 100, defeat Elder Slayers, Elder Guardians, and then maybe the Sextant mods, or maybe Trial of Ascendancies, we'll see. And for Boons of the Atlas 3, we'll do the scouting reports and the harvest plot seeds to finish it off there. But either way, this build has been great to enjoy all the content in the league. Haven't really struggled with it at all. I would say if you're looking for the positive and negative side of the build, for the positive side, it is definitely a build that you can start the league with and end it off with if you are someone like me who doesn't like to run through the leveling process a bunch. In addition to that, it's all content viable, which really does help. A lot of easy gameplay with it as well, just kind of holding down the right click and spinning to win, and you're good to go. Outside of that, though, negative side of the stuff for the build, it really is very highly reliant on the weapon DPS, the physical DPS you have on the weapon. And higher physical DPS weapons tend to get fairly pricey throughout the league. That said, all content, with the exception of some rare Maven invites, is certainly possible under a few hundred C budget, depending on the league. This is 3.17 Arch Nemesis, just for reference there. The other downside to the build, I suppose, is that it is either expensive or you give up DPS to become incredibly tanky. It is moderately tanky as it is, but it is not an overall incredibly tanky build. Not something I would recommend in hardcore for sure. And as you're leveling up, when you're gearing up initially, it can feel slightly squishy, especially with some of the gearing choices that we have. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get right into the gearing choices. So for us, we are going to be using Cyclone with Shockwave, which means that we are going to be limited to either a mace or a staff here, and we are going to be using a war staff. So you can take a look at my war staff here, my war staff here, and essentially what you're looking for is the highest physical DPS possible on these things. Anything above 650 or so will allow you to fairly easily clear all the content in the game. One thing to pay attention to is that having crit chance on your weapon is incredibly important. This build can fairly reliably hit 100% crit chance, but if you don't have innate crit chance on your weapon, like you can see mine has here, has a T1 crit chance roll, if you don't have that, your crit chance is going to be fairly low, and because we're stacking so much into our crit chance and crit damage, it will really impact your damage. So looking for highest physical DPS that you can afford, and really making sure that you're buying a crit chance mod on there as well. Very important to get a high crit chance on your war staff. Base wise, it doesn't really matter. The eventuality rods are going to be more common because it is incredibly difficult to craft a high PDPS war staff, just because of how many crappy garbage rolls they have on there. That said, you're able to fairly reliably get 600 or 700 PDPS bases from doing heist contracts. So if you are in solo self-found and you want to run this build, I would definitely start running those heist contracts. Before you get there, you can run a Hegemony's Era, but it's a very low PDPS weapon, so I really wouldn't recommend it. This is definitely going to be the bread and butter for you. Spend 90% of your available currency on your weapon for this build, and you really can't go wrong. The rest of the slots you can fill with 5 to 10C items that have life and resists, and you're good to go. On the lower end, helm, gloves, boots, all life and resists. Rings, life and resists. Rings, life and resist. Ammi, life and resists. Depending on the time in the league, you can either go life and resist on a belt, or if you're already at week 2 or 3, Wrathless Coil is incredibly cheap. For the first couple of days of the league, it tends to be an X or 2, but it drops drastically in price from there, and you can probably get one nowadays for about 5C in the league. Definitely a good item to have as well. But if we're going to go take a deeper dive into some of the slots and what you might be looking for the higher end pieces, let's go ahead and start with our helm first. So for our helm, we are looking for 2 modifiers primarily. We're looking for a critical strike multiplier, and we are looking for nearby enemies take increased physical damage. So the critical strike multiplier, if we're looking at it here, you can see that it is a modifier from the Warlord's side of things, and then the increased physical damage is an Elder modifier. For this item, we are actually able to fairly reliably craft a helm that looks like this. If you pick up a helm that either has Blood and Sand increased effect as the lab enchant, or Cyclone damage, or Cyclone attack speed, either of those are fine. You can pick up one of those, and you'll have it on a good armor base. You will go ahead and roll that helmet, if it's an Elder helmet, roll it for nearby enemies take increased physical damage. You can do this with alterations, although it's significantly easier to do with harvest crafting. And then you'll take your Elder helmet and roll it to T1 critical strike multiplier. Again, pretty easy with harvest crafting with critical, as there's only one mod for critical on helmets, so very easy to roll. You could also buy one on the market for a couple C. Take Cirrus's orb that he drops, an Awakener's orb, and go ahead and slam the 2 together. Hopefully you get a good roll on your first time, but if you do not, that's perfectly fine. Because what you can do is you can, if you have an open prefix, you can craft suffixes cannot be changed, and then using your harvest crafts, you can reforge for life modifiers are more common, and you are extremely likely within a few rolls, granted it's 2x a pop, within a few rolls to get a very usable helmet. Outside of that, for very low cost, if you're not looking for the more expensive option, you can go with the cheaper option here, which buy a Cyclone damage enchant and throw a couple essences at it, and within a few C, you're going to get something usable. Cyclone, as far as a main damage source, isn't incredibly popular in 3.17. We're looking at probably about 4 or 5% of the player base. So Cyclone damage and Cyclone attack speed enchants are very cheap on a high base level item. And then you can get something that's very usable within a few C. If we're moving on to the other main slots here, we can look at our boots. So for boots, we're looking at a few primary stats. For some base level boots, we are looking for movement speed, we're looking for life, potentially we're looking for resists as well. For me, these are my end game boots with onslaught on kill, additional movement speed if I haven't been hit, elusive, and tailwind. So let's go ahead and take a look at these, and we'll talk about how to craft these so that you guys can get the most out of what you're looking for. So again, if you're going to go ahead and attempt to craft these type of boots for yourself, you're going to take a Redeemer base, and you're going to take a Hunter base, and you're going to be slamming them together with another Awakener's Orb. This is another item that I self-crafted. So if you're looking at this, what you're going to do is you're going to take Tailwind, and Tailwind appears on the Hunter base, and you're also going to take the Onslaught, which appears on the Redeemer base, slam them together, and again, you have an item where you've got suffixes done. Now, in my case, I had a pretty poor lightning resist that happens, but it's usable in the case. And then again, you're going to go and harvest craft. You're going to lock the suffixes and harvest craft to add a critical strike multiplier. It doesn't matter which one you have, and you're going to do that until you hit a good movement speed roll. This one can be more expensive to craft due to the RNG nature of hitting a good movement speed roll. In addition to that, you could potentially, if you hit your Redeemer mod and you have a couple open prefixes, you could try an Azling Slam on it as well. Movement speed from Azling, the reveal, is also very strong, as is her life reveal craft as well. Either would make a very usable boot base. That said, these are pretty endgame. You could very easily go with something like this that has life, resist, and crafted move speed for a couple C. What makes this base in particular more expensive is the chaos resistance on there. Chaos resistance is nice, but it is not mandatory. It can definitely help you in a lot of encounters, but if you don't have chaos resistance, it's not the biggest deal in softcore. So again, life, movement speed, some resistances are perfectly fine. Action speed, which is very nice for this build, is available, as is cooldown recovery rate, which is also very nice for this build, due to the way that Shockwave scales. Both of those are available with the new influence modifiers, so you are able to roll those as well. So a fairly good little boost to your clear and DPS. In addition, we've got our glove slot here, so we are using Asnath's Gentle Touch, which really helps our clear. I'll showcase what this looks like when we're clearing with it, but this is an item that's fairly expensive in the beginning of the league, and then as you get further down the league, it also becomes an item that's worth less than an X. So it is a good item to have, however, it's certainly not mandatory. It actually negatively affects your boss clear because of adding Temporal Chains instead of Assassin's Mark when you're first starting off. And that's not a good thing for you, but it does affect your clear pretty significantly. It's a good item to have. In addition to that, you could also, when you're starting off, look for some rare gloves that have life resists, accuracy, physical attack damage, attack speed. Something like this is just a few C. And then you can also craft something like this that's got rage on hit from the new modifiers. We've got attack speed, we've got life, we've got more accuracy on there. So attack speed's really good. Physical damage to attacks is really good. Accuracy on the gear is pretty good. Life is good as well. Let's go ahead. We talked about the belt, but in addition to this, probably the best belt for the build outside of a Mage Blood would be a Elder Stygian Vice that has life, percentage life, physical damage, and then a couple of the attack speed or physical damage mods while using a flask. That would be higher DPS, higher survivability, just a significantly better overall item for the build. I've been working on crafting one, haven't had a whole lot of luck. Essentially, it is very RNG based, where you're going to be spamming fossils on the belt base, but so far, no luck. Let's go ahead and look at the chest piece here. So for us here, we can reliably craft something like this for around 6 to 8x, maybe a little bit more depending on how unlucky you are. But again, we've got an Elder base and a Warlord, a Warlord base and a Hunter base here. So for our Hunter base, we are looking for the critical strike chance modifier. For our Warlord base, we are looking for the socket attacks to have minus 15 total cost, which makes Cyclone free, which is really nice. Looking for that modifier. We slam those two items together, again with an Awakener's Orb. They're both suffixes, and then we are able to utilize the same strategy that we used on our helmet and our boots to reforge the item, again locking the suffixes in place. Reforge with a caster modifier. It doesn't matter which harvest craft you use. It will guarantee that you get additional curse. Hopefully you get a good roll aside from that, but you can craft life as well to finish off the item. And you can see that for me, I've got more or less crafted life on all three items, and it's working out okay for me. Fairly strong item here. You can start off with a simple corrupted 6-link that has life and resists, no big deal. If you're looking for which of these three mods has the biggest impact for you, attacks have additional critical strike chances, insanely powerful this build as it allows you to cap crit chance, which is very, very strong. Looking at our rings, one ring I have here is I'm just jamming as many resists and some intelligence on the ring to meet requirements. So nothing special here. Few C here to get that ring going. The other ring here is a vulnerability on hit with increased effects, some resists, some life, and some physical damage to attacks. Something like this on a non-steel ring base is less than 100 C. You can also craft these fairly reliably by just spamming the Harvest Reforge crafts for for casters, and you'll fairly reliably hit something usable fairly frequently. But something similar on a different base is about 50C. So I paid a couple extra X here for a few more physical damage to attack mods, but overall, nothing too big there. Curse on Vulnerability is very nice for this build. Amulet, big accuracy roll, critical strike multiplier, life, and then I'm filling out dexterity and intelligence here to meet requirements. Notice that I've got Serpent Stance allocated on here. There are a few options for the build. Serpent Stance is one of the cheaper DPS options, though, that you can go for. It adds critical strike chance, critical strike multiplier, and it does add some block if you're interested as well. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the flasks. We've got a Quicksilver Flask of the Dove, attack speed, movement speed, a Condensed Divine Life Flask of Allaying, get rid of that Corrupted Blood. You could do something different here if you have a Corrupted Blood immunity jewel. We've got a Silver Flask that reduces Curse Effect and reduces charges per use, which gives me 2 uses of this, which is really nice. That prefix is pretty mandatory for a Silver Flask, I think. You need to be able to click it twice. And then a Diamond Flask that gives us additional movement speed. And then we have Lion's Roar. This, ideally, Lion's Roar is not that good anymore. You could also replace one of these flasks with a Bottled Faith to increase your DPS pretty significantly. Something that I've certainly considered for the build, but I don't really need a ton more DPS, which you guys will see here in a minute, but that would certainly be an option to increase the DPS. In that case, your best option is to probably replace the Quicksilver Flask with that to add the most DPS possible, since we don't have an Onslaught on hit ring. If we did have an Onslaught on hit ring, we could certainly drop the Onslaught Flask. And then the last part here is to take a look at the jewels. And we'll come back and talk about the tree in a different video. So we're going to be using a couple different things. Let's go ahead and take a look at our different jewels in the tree here. So we've got a Watcher's Eye jewel. This one is not that great, but I needed the Impale chance to hit 100% Impale. And then the double damage was the best other mod available between the Precision mods, the Purity of Elements mods, and then the Pride mods as well. We've got a rare jewel over here that adds physical damage, area damage, multiplier, life. This is a decent jewel. You can get things like this for around 25C or so that has 3 damage mods and a life mod on it. Make sure one of them is critical strike multiplier, and then there are a variety of other things that affect us, like attack speed, or global physical damage, or area damage, or physical damage with two-handed weapons, with war staffs, etc. Any of those are perfectly fine. And then scrolling down here, go ahead and look at our large cluster jewel, Overlord, Smite the Weak, and Weight Advantage. So if you're going to go cluster jewels, one of the notables has to be Overlord. The other two, there are a variety of different options available that are good, but one of them has to be Overlord, because you do not want to have to pick up a Fortify wheel on the tree, and Fortify is fairly strong. And then we are using Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame to give us Endless Hunger here. These are fairly cheap jewels for what they offer. Endless Hunger gives us 20% increased attack speed, which is a pretty nice DPS boost. It also allows us to drop Unwavering Stance, which is fairly big. And then it gives us Blading Immunity, which is less impactful. There are a couple other jewels that are notable here. Probably the most notable is Master of Metal. However, it's an extremely expensive jewel. If you're looking at spending about 40x on the jewels, you can certainly go that route. Arena Champion is the other one of note here, but these two give you a pretty nice boost. And to be totally honest, they are very similar in terms of power as if you compared them to 2 rare jewels that cost about the same. I believe the pair currently is about 2.5 to 4x. If you spent about 2x on regular jewels, you would get about the same level of power. It was just something I was messing around with, so feel free to experiment if you would like. And then the last jewel in here is just a medium jewel that adds magnifier and pressure points. Medium jewels can be good. Honestly, they're not significantly more impactful than points spent on the tree are, though. So use at your own discretion. Alright, that takes it for the gearing. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at our links here. So our main link is obviously a Cyclone linked with Pulverized. Brutality, Awakened Brutality is a nice upgrade. Melee Physical, Awakened Melee Physical is a nice upgrade. Shockwave. And then our sixth link is really dependent on the build. Usually when you're starting off, you're going to go ahead and use Impale. And then as you get more points in the tree, you can transition away from Impale into either increased critical damage support or infused channeling support. You can also use Rage here as well if you're interested. Rage would be a fourth option. So let's talk about the benefits, drawbacks of each one of those. For Impale, the benefit is that it comes online earlier points-wise, so when you're in your 70s, early 80s, Impale is probably going to be the choice because you don't have the points to reach across the tree to do what you need. Critical strike damage is obviously the damage option. Once you're about level 88 or 90, you're able to fill 100% Impale chance on the tree, and critical strike damage will just be a straight 20% more damage for you at that point, assuming you have critical strike chance on your weapon. Infused channeling is kind of a middle ground. It is more damage than Impale, but it's less damage than increased critical strike damage. However, it does give you more. It gives you more survivability. And that's a good thing for this build. The bad thing about infused channeling is it does not impact Shockwave's damage, whereas critical strike damage does impact Shockwave's damage. Alright, we're going to go ahead and stop the build right there, or stop the guide right here, and we'll go ahead and jump back on for the next video to do a discussion of the passive tree.